My husband introduced me as the help at the gala, while his mistress was called his wife. Little did they know, I own the entire company. I humiliated them and fired them in front of everyone. Hello everyone. Thank you for being here with me today. Before I begin my story, I'd love to know which city you're joining us from. Please feel free to share in the comments. Now, let me take you into this story. The crystal chandelier hanging from the ceiling of the grand ballroom at the Plaza Hotel was blinding, casting a prism of light over hundreds of New York's elite. The air smelled of expensive champagne, fresh lilies, and the heavy, cloying scent of ambition. I stood in the shadow of a large marble pillar, clutching a glass of lukewarm water, my knuckles turning white. I was wearing a plain, shapeless black dress that I had pulled from the back of my closet, exactly as I had been instructed to do. I felt small. I felt invisible. But most of all, I felt a cold, sharp rage beginning to crystallize in the center of my chest. Across the room, under the warm glow of the spotlight, stood my husband, Robert. He looked impeccable in his tailored tuxedo, a suit that I knew cost more than the monthly allowance he gave me for groceries. He was laughing, throwing his head back in that charming, boyish way that had once made my heart flutter. But he wasn't laughing with me. His arm was wrapped tightly, possessively, around the waist of a woman in a shimmering scarlet gown. Jessica. She was young, vibrant, and looked at him with eyes that screamed adoration and victory. They looked like the golden couple of the Kensington Group, the picture of success and future prosperity. I watched as Mr. Stevens, one of the most crucial investors for the company, approached them. My breath hitched in my throat. Mr. Stevens was an old friend of my late father. He had known me when I was a child, though it had been years since we last spoke. If he recognized me, everything Robert had built, this house of cards, this charade, would come crashing down instantly. I saw Mr. Stevens' eyes scan the room and land on me. A flicker of recognition sparked in his gaze. He tilted his head, confused, and gestured toward me. I saw Robert's face drain of color. Panic flashed in his eyes, raw and terrified. He looked from Mr. Stevens to me, and then to Jessica. He had a split second to make a choice. He could have told the truth. He could have said, "That is my wife, Sarah." He could have even lied kindly and said I was a distant cousin. Instead, Robert did something unforgivable. He let out a nervous, dismissive chuckle, waving his hand at me as if I were a stray dog that had wandered into a fine dining establishment. "Oh, her?" Robert said, his voice loud enough to carry over the soft jazz music. "Don't mind her, Mr. Stevens. That's just Sarah. She's my housekeeper. She's a bit slow, but she helps out with the cleaning sometimes. She just stopped by to drop off some keys I forgot." Time seemed to stop. The hum of conversation around us didn't cease, but for me, the world went silent. Housekeeper. The word echoed in my skull, bouncing around like a bullet in a metal chamber. After 2 years of marriage, after 2 years of washing his clothes, cooking his meals, and supporting his dreams from the shadows, I was reduced to the help. Mr. Stevens looked taken aback, his eyebrows knitting together. But Robert wasn't finished digging his own grave. He turned back to Jessica, pulling her closer until her body was pressed against his side. He beamed at the investor, his chest puffing out with arrogant pride. "But this," Robert announced, his voice booming with confidence, "this is the woman I wanted you to meet. This is Tiffany. I mean, Jessica. My partner. My soulmate. And my future wife." A gasp rippled through the small circle of people standing nearby. Jessica giggled, feigning shyness, and rested her head on his shoulder, flashing a diamond ring that sparkled aggressively under the lights, a ring I had never seen before. That was it. The final fracture. The dam I had built to hold back my tears, my disappointment, and my anger for the last 2 years finally shattered. But I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't run away in shame as Robert clearly hoped I would. Instead, something inside me, something ancient and powerful that I had buried deep alongside my true identity, woke up. I set my glass of water down on a passing waiter's tray with a deliberate clink. I smoothed the fabric of my cheap black dress. I reached up and pulled the elastic band from my hair, letting my dark locks cascade down my back. I lifted my chin. I began to walk. I didn't walk toward the exit. I walked straight toward the stage. The crowd seemed to sense the shift in the atmosphere, parting for me as I moved with a predatory grace. Robert's eyes widened as he saw me approaching. He looked confused, then terrified. He mouthed the word stop, but I looked right through him. I climbed the stairs to the stage. The band stopped playing. The room fell into a hush, the kind of heavy silence that precedes a storm. I walked over to the bewildered MC, a young man who looked ready to faint, and I gently, but firmly, took the microphone from his hand. The feedback whined for a split second, piercing the silence, before I steadied it. I looked out at the sea of faces, the directors, the investors, the employees. And then I locked eyes with Robert, who was now trembling, his face a mask of horror. I smiled, but it wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of an executioner. "Is this thing on?" I asked, my voice calm, clear, and dripping with authority. "Before I tell you what happened next, before I tell you how I brought that entire room to its knees, I need to thank you. Yes, you. If you are listening to this, you are my witness. You are the jury. If you've ever been underestimated, if you've ever been betrayed by the one person who was supposed to protect you, then you know exactly how I felt in that moment. Before we go any further, please, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button and type the name of your city in the comments. Let me know where you are listening from. Seeing your support helps me know I'm not alone in this. It reminds me that there are strong people everywhere who refuse to let disrespect slide. Thank you for being here with me. Now, let me take you back to the beginning, to explain how a billionaire heiress ended up being introduced as a maid by her own husband. To understand why I stood on that stage in a dress that cost less than $20, letting my husband humiliate me, you have to understand who I really am. My name is not just Sarah Evans, as Robert believed. My birth name is Sarah Kensington. Yes, that Kensington. My father was Richard Kensington, the steel and real estate tycoon who built the skyline of this city, and my mother was the brilliant mind behind the Kensington Foundation. I grew up in a world of private jets, gala dinners, and people who smiled at you with their teeth but never with their eyes. When my parents passed away in a tragic plane crash 10 years ago, I was 28. I was devastated, lost, and suddenly the sole heir to a fortune that was too vast for me to even comprehend. I inherited everything: the real estate, the stock portfolio, the art collection, and the controlling interest in the Kensington Group. But inheritance is a double-edged sword. It brings comfort, yes, but it also brings vultures. And the biggest vulture of all was named Brian. Brian was my fiancé at the time. He was charming, sophisticated, and seemed to understand my grief like no one else. He held my hand at the funeral, he managed the press, he was my rock. I loved him. I trusted him with my life. We were weeks away from our wedding when my world shattered for the first time. I had come home early from a meeting with the estate lawyers. I walked into my father's study, which Brian had already claimed as his own, to surprise him. The door was slightly ajar. I heard his voice, loud and boasting, talking on the phone. "Don't worry about the prenup, Mark," Brian was saying, laughing as he swirled a glass of my father's scotch. "The stupid girl is so traumatized she'll sign anything I put in front of her. Once the ring is on her finger, I'm liquidating the assets. We're going to sell the company piece by piece. I'll be a billionaire by Christmas, and she can go cry in a mental institution for all I care. She's weak, Mark. She's just a cash cow waiting to be milked." I stood frozen in the hallway, my blood turning to ice. Cash cow. That was all I was to him. Not a partner, not a future wife, but a transaction. A paycheck. I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I simply walked out of the house, got in my car, and drove. I called my family lawyer, Mr. Henderson, my father's most trusted friend and my godfather, and told him to cancel everything. I broke off the engagement via a legal letter. I never spoke to Brian again. But the damage was done. The betrayal broke something fundamental inside me. I realized that as long as I was Sarah Kensington, the heiress, I would never know if someone truly loved me. The money was a wall, a barrier that prevented genuine connection. I developed a deep, paralyzing fear that every man who smiled at me was just calculating my net worth. So, I ran. Not physically, but existentially. I legally adopted my mother's maiden name, Evans. I stepped down from the public face of the company, appointing a board of directors and Mr. Henderson to run the day-to-day operations. I remained the majority shareholder, the owner, the one with the final veto power, but to the outside world, Sarah Kensington had become a recluse, a grief-stricken socialite who had vanished from the public eye. I bought a modest apartment in Queens. I started driving a used Honda. I put away my designer clothes and jewelry in a safety deposit box and started wearing simple, off-the-rack clothing. I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to be normal. I found solace in my true passion, restoration. I loved taking old, broken things, furniture that people had thrown away, and bringing them back to life. There was something healing about stripping away the layers of grime and damage to reveal the beautiful wood underneath. It was a metaphor for my own life, I suppose. I spent my days in a rented workshop, smelling of varnish and sawdust, stained with paint, and for the first time in my life, I felt real. I told myself that if I ever married again, it would be for love, and love alone. I wanted a man who would love Sarah the furniture restorer, Sarah the girl who burned toast and laughed too loud at bad movies. I wanted a man who didn't care about the Kensington fortune. That was the dream. That was why I created Sarah Evans. And that was exactly how I walked right into the trap of Robert. I met him 2 years after the Brian incident. I was cautious, guarded, and cynical. I wasn't looking for romance. I was just looking for a decent cup of coffee on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. I walked into a small, dusty bookstore cafe near my apartment, shaking off my umbrella, and bumped right into him. Literally. I spilled my latte all over his shirt. I was mortified. I expected him to yell, to be annoyed, to demand I pay for the dry cleaning. Instead, he looked down at the brown stain spreading across his chest, looked up at me, and burst out laughing. "Well," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "I guess this shirt was too boring anyway. You just added some character to it." That was Robert. Or at least, that was the Robert the first fell in love with. He was handsome in a rugged, unpolished way. He wasn't a smooth talker like Brian. He seemed genuine. He seemed kind. I didn't know it then, but that spilled coffee was the beginning of the most expensive mistake of my life. I thought I was protecting myself by hiding my identity. I thought I was being smart. But in trying to avoid a gold digger who knew my worth, I ended up with a man who despised me because he thought I had none. Our courtship was simple. It was quiet. It was everything I thought I wanted. Robert told me he was in marketing, working for a mid-level firm, trying to catch a break. He talked about his dreams of making it big in the corporate world, of proving himself. He seemed ambitious, but in a scrappy, underdog sort of way that I found endearing. I told him I restored antique furniture. I told him I lived paycheck to paycheck, which, in my Sarah Evans persona, was technically true since I only allowed myself to live off the meager earnings from my workshop. I never touched the Kensington Trust Fund for my daily expenses. "That's amazing," Robert had said on our third date, sitting on a park bench eating hot dogs because neither of us wanted to spend money on a fancy restaurant. "You take broken things and fix them. That takes a lot of patience. A lot of heart." He looked at me with such intensity that I felt my defenses melting. He didn't ask about my family. He didn't ask about my connections. He just asked about me. He asked what my favorite color was, what books I read, why I liked the smell of cedar wood. For 6 months, we lived inside a bubble of domestic bliss. It wasn't luxurious, but it felt rich. I remember one evening vividly. It was my birthday. With Brian, birthdays were events, galas, diamond necklaces, photographers. With Robert, it was raining, and we were in my small living room. He pulled a small, poorly wrapped box out of his pocket. He looked nervous. "I know it's not much, Sarah," he stammered. "I'm saving up for a new car, so things are a bit tight. But I saw this and thought of you." I opened the box. Inside was a simple silver hair clip, shaped like a leaf. It couldn't have cost more than $30. But as I held it, tears pricked my eyes. It was delicate and unpretentious. It was real. "I love it, Rob," I whispered, and I meant it. I cherished that clip more than the 10-carat diamond Brian had tried to shackle me with. I wore it every day. It became a symbol of our love, a love that didn't need money to sustain it. Or so I thought. We moved in together after a year. Robert moved into my apartment in Queens because it was rent-controlled, or so I told him. I actually owned the building, but he didn't need to know that. We split the bills. We cooked together. But there were cracks, tiny little hairline fractures that I chose to ignore. Robert was obsessed with status. He would stare at the luxury cars passing by on the street with a hunger that unsettled me. He would rant for hours about his bosses, calling them idiots who didn't recognize his genius. If I just had a foot in the door at a real company, he would say, pacing our small living room. Like the Kensington Group. If I could get in there, Sarah, I'd run that place in 5 years. I just need a chance. The Kensington Group. My company. Hearing him talk about my legacy with such craving made me uncomfortable, but I chalked it up to ambition. I wanted to help him. I wanted him to be happy. So, I did the one thing I swore I would never do. I pulled a string. I didn't tell him, of course. I called Mr. Henderson from a burner phone. "There's a man named Robert Miller applying for a junior marketing position," I told my godfather. "Make sure his resume gets to the top of the pile. But he cannot know it came from me. He cannot know I have any connection to the company. Understood? Are you sure about this, Sarah?" Mr. Henderson had asked, his voice heavy with concern. "Mixing your two worlds, it's dangerous." "He just needs a break, Uncle Hen," I said. "He's talented. He just needs a chance." 2 weeks later, Robert came home screaming with joy. He picked me up and spun me around. "I got it. I got the interview at Kensington. Can you believe it? Me. They called me." I acted surprised. I celebrated with him. I baked a cake. I watched him put on his best suit, which I had secretly paid to have tailored for him, and walk out the door to conquer the world. When he got the job, he was ecstatic. His salary doubled. He felt like a king. And I felt happy because he was happy. I thought this was the start of our happily ever after. He proposed 3 months after he started at Kensington. He did it on the roof of our apartment building, with the city lights twinkling behind us. It was romantic. It was perfect. I said yes without hesitation. "I don't have much to offer you, Sarah," he said, looking deep into my eyes. "But I promise I'll work hard. I'll get promoted. I'll buy us a big house one day. You won't have to scrub old furniture forever." I frowned slightly at that. "I like restoring furniture, Rob." I know, he waved it off. "But you won't have to. You'll be a lady of leisure." "My wife?" I should have listened to the tone of his voice then. I should have heard the condescension disguised as care. But I was in love. I was wearing rose-colored glasses, and I didn't see the red flags waving violently in my face. I didn't see that he didn't love me for who I was, he loved me for who he could mold me into, an audience for his success. And I certainly didn't anticipate how quickly the Kensington culture, or rather, his perception of it, would rot his soul from the inside out. The wedding was a small courthouse affair. Robert complained about it, of course. He wanted a big reception, something he could invite his new colleagues to, something to show off. But I insisted on keeping it small. "We're saving for a house, remember?" I reminded him. He sulked, but eventually agreed, though he made sure to buy himself an expensive watch on credit for the big day, claiming a man in his position needed to look the part. Before we signed the marriage license, I introduced the topic of a prenuptial agreement. This was the trickiest part of my charade. How does a poor furniture restorer explain a prenup to a rising marketing executive? I sat him down at our chipped kitchen table. My hands were trembling slightly. "Rob, I want us to sign a prenup." He laughed, a harsh, barking sound. "A prenup? Sarah, look around. We don't have anything. What are you protecting? Your collection of sandpaper?" His mockery stung, but I kept my voice steady. "It's not about what we have now. It's about the principle. My mother, she always taught me that financial independence is important. I want us to build our future together, but I want what's mine to be mine and what's yours to be yours. If we separate, we leave with what we came with. No alimony. No fighting over assets." Robert looked at me with a mix of amusement and pity. He clearly thought I was being ridiculous, a poor girl trying to act like she had dignity. But then, a gleam appeared in his eye. He was thinking about his new salary, his future promotions, his potential millions. He thought he was the one being protected. "You know what?" he grinned, leaning back in his chair. "That's actually smart, babe. I'm going to be making a lot of money at Kensington. Serious money. If this is what makes you feel secure, sure. Let's sign it. I don't want you coming after my bonuses if things go south." He signed it without even reading the fine print. He didn't know that the assets I was keeping separate included the Kensington Tower, 3 estates in the Hamptons, a vineyard in France, and billions of dollars in diversified investments. He signed away his claim to the greatest fortune in New York because he was too arrogant to believe his wife could be anything more than she appeared. For the first 6 months of marriage, things were okay. Not great, but okay. But as Robert settled into his role at the Kensington Group, he began to change. The corporate ladder wasn't just a job to him, it was a religion. He became obsessed with appearances. He started coming home late, his mind still at the office. He would talk endlessly about the executives, the expensive lunches, the suits, the cars. He began to mirror the behavior of the people he admired, or rather, the shallow, toxic traits he thought successful people had. "You need to dress better, Sarah," he told me one morning as I was getting ready to go to my workshop. He gestured vaguely at my flannel shirt and jeans. "If my coworkers see you, they'll think I'm not taking care of you. It reflects badly on me." "I work with wood and varnish, Rob," I replied, trying to keep the peace. "I can't wear a silk blouse to strip paint." "Well, maybe you should find a different hobby," he snapped. "Something cleaner. Like, I don't know, flower arranging. Or charity work. That's what the wives of the VPs do." Hobby. He called my career, my passion, a hobby. I swallowed the insult. "It pays the bills, Rob." "Barely," he scoffed. "My bonus this quarter is more than you make in a year." That wasn't true. My investment dividends in a single day were more than he would make in a lifetime, but I couldn't say that. So I just nodded and poured his coffee. The dynamic shifted rapidly. He was the provider, in his mind, and I was the dependent. He started creating a narrative where he was the savior, rescuing me from poverty, and I was the ungrateful weight around his neck. He stopped asking about my day. He stopped looking at me with affection. His eyes were always on his phone, checking emails, checking stock prices, checking the approval of his peers. He started hiding his phone screen when I walked into the room. But the worst part was the financial control. Despite the prenup, we had a joint account for household expenses. Robert insisted on managing it. "I'm the finance guy," he said. "You just worry about whatever it is you do." He started scrutinizing every penny I spent at the grocery store. "Why did you buy the organic chicken, Sarah? It's $3 more. Do you think we're made of money? You just bought a $500 pair of shoes, Rob," I pointed out gently. "That's an investment," he yelled, his face turning red. "I need to look successful to be successful. This chicken is just going down the toilet. Stop wasting my money." My money. It was always his money now. I felt myself shrinking. I felt the vibrant, independent woman I was becoming smaller and smaller, crushed under the weight of his growing ego. I tried to rationalize it. I told myself it was just stress. I told myself the pressure of the Kensington Group was getting to him. I told myself if I just supported him more, if I just loved him harder, the old Robert, the man who laughed when I spilled coffee on him, would come back. But the old Robert was gone. Or maybe he never existed. Maybe the Kensington Group hadn't changed him, maybe it had just given him the permission to be who he really was. And then, the real humiliation began. It started in the kitchen, with a plate of scrambled eggs. The morning sun was streaming through the window of our Queen's apartment, but inside, the atmosphere was frigid. I was standing by the stove, making breakfast. It was my morning ritual: scrambled eggs, toast, black coffee. I did it every day, like a clockwork soldier. Robert walked into the kitchen. The smell of his cologne, savage, heavy and musky, hit me before he did. He was dressed in a navy suit, impeccably pressed. He looked like $1,000,000. He looked at me, in my worn-out robe, and curled his lip. He sat down at the table and looked at the plate I placed in front of him. "Eggs again?" he sighed, pushing the plate away with the tip of his finger. "I thought you liked them," I said, trying to keep my voice cheerful. "You said they were good yesterday." "I said they were edible, Sarah. There's a difference." He picked up his coffee, took a sip, and grimaced. "And this coffee, it tastes like dirt. Can't we afford an espresso machine? Or go to Starbucks like normal people? We're saving, remember?" I said quietly. "For the house." "I'm saving," he corrected me sharply. "You're just spending." He reached into his wallet and pulled out a wad of cash. He threw it on the table. It scattered across the cheap laminate surface. "Here," he said. "Your allowance for the week." I looked at the money. It was $200. "Rob," I said, feeling a lump form in my throat. "This isn't enough. The electric bill is due, and we need groceries, and the internet." "Make it work," he snapped, slamming his hand on the table. "God, Sarah, do you have any idea how hard I work? I'm out there busting my ass with sharks, trying to secure our future, and I come home to you complaining about money? Learn to budget. Clip coupons. Do something useful instead of playing with your little wooden toys all day." My little wooden toys had just sold at an auction for $10,000 under an anonymous seller handle, money that I had quietly donated to charity because I couldn't bring it home without raising questions. But to him, I was just a drain on his resources. "I'm sorry," I whispered. It was my default response now. "I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing and just be better," he muttered, checking his reflection in the back of a spoon. "You know, I look at the other wives at the company events, or the women at the company. They're sharp. They're sophisticated. They help their husbands network. You just drag me down. You're an anchor, Sarah. He stood up, downed the rest of the coffee he claimed to hate, and walked to the door. I'll be late tonight. Client dinner. Don't wait up. He didn't kiss me goodbye. He hadn't kissed me goodbye in 6 months. After he left, I stared at the scrambled eggs. They were cold. I felt a tear slide down my cheek, hot and stinging. I wasn't crying because I was poor. I was crying because I was the richest woman in New York, and I had allowed myself to be treated like a beggar in my own home. I sat there and thought about the allowance. It was a power play. He wanted me dependent. He wanted me to have to ask him for everything, to beg for scraps so he could feel like the big man. It was financial abuse, plain and simple. I picked up the money and put it in the jar we kept for bills. Then, I went to my secret hiding spot, a hollowed-out book on the shelf, and pulled out my burner phone. I checked my bank balance. The numbers on the screen were staggering. 9 figures. I could buy this entire apartment complex right now. I could buy the building Robert worked in. I could buy the suit off his back. But I didn't. Because I needed to know. I needed to know how far he would go. I needed to know if there was any redemption left for him. Was it just the stress? Was he just misguided? But as the weeks went on, the cruelty escalated. He started treating me like his personal servant. Iron my shirt, Sarah. And do it right this time, no creases. Polish my shoes. They look scuffed. Why is there dust on the TV? What do you do all day? He never asked about me. He never touched me unless it was to move me out of his way. I became a ghost in my own marriage. And then, the comparisons started. He stopped comparing me to generic other wives and started comparing me to someone specific. Someone named Jessica. Jessica made this incredible presentation today, he would say over dinner, his eyes lighting up in a way they hadn't for me in years. She's so smart. She gets it. She understands the market. That's nice, I would say, picking at my food. And she dresses so professionally, he continued, eyeing my sweatshirt with disdain. She always looks put together. You could learn a thing or two from her. Jessica. The name started to appear in every conversation. Jessica said this. Jessica did that. Jessica thought this restaurant was tacky. Jessica thought this movie was brilliant. I felt a cold dread settling in my stomach. It wasn't just admiration. I knew the look in his eyes. It was the look of a man who was hungry. And I was no longer the meal he wanted. A woman knows. We always know. It's not usually a smoking gun at first, it's a shift in the wind. It's the silence that feels heavier. It's the phone that is always placed face down on the table. Robert started guarding his phone with his life. He took it to the bathroom. He slept with it under his pillow. If I walked into the room while he was texting, he would abruptly lock the screen and look guilty. Who are you talking to? I asked one night. Work, he snapped. God, Sarah, stop being so insecure. It's just work. The deal with the Japanese investors is intense. At 11 p.m. on a Sunday? I asked quietly. Business is global, Sarah. You wouldn't understand. You don't have a real job. The gaslighting was subtle at first, then blatant. But the physical evidence began to mount. First, it was the smell. Robert had always worn Savage. But one night, he came home smelling of something else. Beneath the cologne, there was a faint, lingering scent of vanilla and jasmine. It was a woman's perfume. Expensive. Sweet. I hugged him when he walked in, burying my face in his jacket. He stiffened and pulled away. I'm sweaty, he said quickly. Need a shower. You smell nice, I said, testing him. Different. It's, new air freshener in the office, he stammered, not meeting my eyes. They changed the cleaning supply vendor. Air freshener. Right. Then, there was the receipt. I was doing the laundry, checking his pockets like I always did. I found a crumpled piece of paper in his suit jacket. It was a receipt from a high-end boutique on Fifth Avenue. A receipt for a leather handbag. The price was $2,000. My heart hammered against my ribs. $2,000. He screamed at me for buying organic chicken, but he spent $2,000 on a bag? I waited. My birthday was coming up in a week. Maybe it was a surprise. Maybe he was trying to make amends. I held onto that shred of hope like a lifeline. My birthday came and went. Robert gave me a card. No bag. No gift. Just a card signed, Love, Rob. I'm sorry, babe, he said, looking bored. Money is tight right now. The market is volatile. Next year, I promise. I looked at him, holding the card, and I felt something inside me die. It wasn't the lack of a gift. I could buy the boutique. It was the lie. It was the fact that he had bought that bag for someone else with our money, money I had scrimped and saved, money I had contributed to the joint account. I didn't confront him yet. I needed proof. Irrefutable proof. I wasn't going to be the crazy, jealous wife he could dismiss. I was going to be the prosecutor. The next day, I called the Kensington Group's main line. I didn't call his direct line. I called the general reception. Good morning, Kensington Group, the receptionist chirped. Hi, I said, disguising my voice. I'm trying to reach Robert Miller's assistant? Or maybe the intern working with him? I have a delivery for him. Oh, you mean Jessica? The receptionist said helpfully. Let me transfer you. The phone rang. Then, a voice answered. It was smooth, confident, and slightly husky. Jessica speaking. I didn't say anything. I just breathed, listening to the background noise. Hello? She asked. Then, I heard a man's voice in the background. Robert's voice. Who is it, Jess? He asked. His voice was low, intimate. Not his office voice. I don't know, no one's talking, she giggled. Probably a robocall. Hang up, Robert said playfully. Come back here. We have work to do. I hung up. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped the phone. Come back here. It was undeniably him. And it was undeniably happening in my company, on my time, while I sat at home counting coupons. I sat on the floor of my living room, surrounded by my restored furniture. I looked at a chair I had just finished, a beautiful Victorian armchair that I had rescued from a dumpster and reupholstered in velvet. I had put so much love into it. I had tried to do the same with Robert. I had tried to sand down his rough edges, polish him up, and make him shine. But you can't restore something that is rotten to the core. I decided I needed to see her. I needed to look her in the eye. I needed to see what $2,000 of my husband's stolen affection looked like. I chose a Tuesday. I knew Robert's schedule. He had a client lunch at noon. I prepared a small Tupperware container with his allergy medication. He had terrible seasonal allergies, and he had forgotten his pills on the counter that morning. It was the perfect, innocent excuse for a doting wife to stop by. I dressed in my usual attire, jeans and a clean but faded sweater. I took the subway to Manhattan. Standing in front of the Kensington Tower always gave me a surreal feeling. It was a monolith of glass and steel that bore my family's name, yet I stood on the sidewalk like a tourist. I didn't go in through the executive entrance. I walked into the main lobby. I scanned the area. And then I saw them. They weren't at a client lunch. They were at the casual bistro in the lobby, sitting at a corner table. Robert and a woman. She was stunning. I had to admit it. She had blonde hair styled in loose waves, perfectly applied makeup, and she was wearing a tailored cream suit that screamed money. And on the chair next to her sat the black leather handbag. The $2,000 bag. They were leaning in close. Robert was feeding her a fry from his plate. He was laughing, that open, carefree laugh I hadn't heard in years. He looked at her with total adoration. He touched her hand, her arm, her hair. They were in their own little world. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. Seeing it in your mind is one thing, seeing it in 4K reality is another. It was visceral. It was nauseating. I took a deep breath and walked toward them. I didn't want to cause a scene yet. I just wanted to hand him his pills and see his face. I wanted to see him squirm. I reached their table. Rob? Robert's head snapped up. The color drained from his face so fast he looked like a corpse. He dropped the fry he was holding. Sarah, he choked out. What are you doing here? Jessica looked me up and down. Her eyes were cold, calculating, and cruel. She took in my jeans, my sweater, my lack of makeup. She smirked. It was a tiny, superior smirk that said, "So this is the competition? I've already won." "I brought your allergy pills," I said, holding out the Tupperware. "You left them on the counter. I didn't want you to be miserable all afternoon." Robert didn't take the pills. He looked around the lobby frantically, checking to see if anyone important was watching. He stood up abruptly, blocking me from Jessica's view. "You shouldn't be here," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "I'm in a meeting." "A meeting with French fries?" I asked, looking past him at Jessica. Jessica took a sip of her iced tea, not breaking eye contact with me. "Rob," she drawled, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. "Is this the cleaning lady you mentioned? Or did the Kensington group start letting homeless people into the lobby?" My blood ran cold. Homeless people. I looked at Robert, waiting for him to defend me. Waiting for him to say, "Don't speak about my wife that way." Robert didn't defend me. He looked at Jessica, then looked at me, and shame flooded his features. Not shame for cheating, but shame for me. Shame that he was associated with someone who looked like me in front of his glamorous mistress. He grabbed my arm, his grip painful. "Lower your voice," he whispered furiously. "You're embarrassing me. Jessica is a colleague. A very important one. Go home, Sarah. Just go home." "You're not going to introduce us?" I asked, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "No," he snapped. "Leave. Now. Before security escorts you out." He grabbed the pills from my hand and practically shoved me toward the exit. "I'll deal with you later," he muttered. Then he turned back to the table, his whole demeanor changing instantly as he sat down and apologized to Jessica. I heard him say, "I'm so sorry. She's mentally unstable. A charity case I help out." I walked out of the revolving doors and onto the busy New York street. The noise of the traffic washed over me. I felt numb. Mentally unstable. Charity case. Homeless. That was the moment. That was the exact moment the last ember of love for Robert was extinguished. There was no sadness left. No longing. Just a cold, hard clarity. He didn't just fall out of love with me. He despised me. He despised my simplicity, the very thing he once claimed to love. He was a parasite, feeding on the status of the company my family built, using my money to buy gifts for his mistress, all while treating me like trash. I hailed a taxi. "Where to, lady?" the driver asked. "Upper East Side," I said. "Mr. Henderson's office." It was time to stop being Sarah Evans, the furniture restorer. It was time to wake up Sarah Kensington. That night, Robert came home late, as usual. He looked wary, expecting a fight about the lobby incident. When I didn't scream at him, he relaxed, assuming I was too cowed to challenge him. He was right about the cowed part, or so he thought. In reality, I was just biding my time. He tossed a heavy, cream-colored envelope onto the coffee table. It had gold lettering embossed on the front. "The annual Kensington Gala," he announced, adjusting his tie in the mirror. "It's this Saturday. At the Plaza." I looked at the invitation. I knew about the gala, of course. My family had hosted it for 50 years. I used to run around the ballroom as a little girl while my father made speeches. "Am I invited?" I asked, feigning ignorance. Robert sighed, a long, suffering sound. "Unfortunately, yes. It's mandatory for senior management to bring their spouses. It's a family values thing. If I show up alone, it looks bad." He turned to face me, his expression stern. He looked like a parent scolding a disobedient child. "But if you are coming, Sarah, there are conditions." "Serious conditions." I sat up straighter. "Conditions?" "Yes," he began, ticking them off on his fingers. "First, appearance. You cannot wear any of your thrift store rags. You need to wear black. Plain black. Long sleeves. High neck. Nothing flashy. No patterns. And absolutely no jewelry. I don't want you wearing those tacky beads you make. You need to look invisible." "Invisible," I repeated. "Got it." "Second," he continued, pacing the room. "Do not speak. I mean it. If someone asks you a question, give a one-word answer. Yes, no, thank you. Do not try to be funny. Do not try to talk about your furniture business. These are serious people, Sarah. Billionaires. They don't want to hear about how you sanded a chair." My hands clenched into fists at my sides. "I can hold a conversation, Rob." "No, you can't," he cut me off. "Not with these people. You'll embarrass yourself, and more importantly, you'll embarrass me. I'm up for a huge promotion, Sarah. A partnership. I cannot have you ruining this for me." He stopped pacing and leaned in close, his face inches from mine. His eyes were cold and hard. "And third, and this is the most important rule. Do not act like us. Don't cling to me. Don't try to hold my hand. Honestly, if anyone asks, just let me do the talking. Ideally, just pretend you're a distant relative I'm doing a favor for. A cousin from the countryside. It explains why you're so unsophisticated. A cousin. A distant relative." The insults were so creative, I almost admired them. "Almost." "Okay," I said softly. "I understand. Black dress. No jewelry. Don't speak. Cousin." Robert looked relieved. He patted my shoulder condescendingly. "Good girl. If you pull this off, Sarah, maybe things will change. Maybe I'll be less stressed. Maybe we can go on a vacation." He was dangling a carrot. A rotten, moldy carrot. He thought I was desperate for his approval. He didn't know I was memorizing his words to use as evidence in court. "I'll be good," I promised. "I won't ruin your big night." I'm going to destroy it, I thought. He went to bed, whistling. I stayed up. I went to my closet and found the dress he described. It was an old mourning dress I had worn to a funeral years ago. It was shapeless and drab. Perfect. Then, I reached into the very back of my closet, behind the winter coats, and pulled out a small, locked metal box. I keyed in the code. Inside sat the Kensington emeralds, a necklace and earring set worth more than the GDP of a small country. They had belonged to my grandmother. I wouldn't wear them. Not yet. But I touched the cold stones, drawing strength from them. I picked up my phone and texted Mr. Henderson. Message, he invited me. He gave me rules. He wants me to be invisible. A moment later, a reply came. Reply, invisibility is a superpower, Sarah. It lets you see everything. Are you ready for Saturday? I typed back 2 words. I'm ready. Saturday came. I put on the black dress. I pulled my hair back into a severe, unflattering bun. I wore no makeup. I looked in the mirror and saw a ghost. Perfect, Robert said when he saw me. You blend right into the background. Just stay there. We got into the car. He drove. He spent the whole ride texting Jessica, smiling at his phone while I stared out the window at the passing city lights. He had no idea that he was driving his executioner to the scaffold. He had no idea that the cousin from the countryside held the keys to his kingdom. We arrived at the plaza. He tossed the keys to the valet, a man I recognized, a man who almost bowed to me before I shot him a warning look. Robert marched in ahead of me, leaving me to scramble behind him in my cheap heels. And now, we are back where we started. In the ballroom. With the mic in my hand. Robert's face was pale. Jessica's mouth was open. The room was silent. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the scent of lilies and betrayal. Good evening, everyone, I said into the microphone. My name is Sarah. I paused. I looked at Mr. Stevens, who was watching me with intense fascination. I looked at Robert, who looked like he was about to vomit. My husband just introduced me as his housekeeper, I continued, my voice steady. And he introduced his mistress as his future wife. A collective gasp tore through the room. But there is one small detail my husband forgot to mention, I said, my eyes locking onto his. A detail that might change his future plans. I smiled. He forgot to mention that I am not the housekeeper. You might be wondering, how did I stay so calm? How did I walk into that ballroom knowing exactly what was about to happen without my knees buckling? The truth is, I wasn't calm. I was cold. There is a difference. Calm is peace, cold is the absence of mercy. And I had shed my mercy days ago, replacing it with a plan so precise it would cut Robert and Jessica out of my life like a surgeon removing a tumor. It started the morning after Robert gave me the invitation and those humiliating rules. While he was at work, preening in front of mirrors and probably texting Jessica, I was in motion. I called Mr. Henderson. We met not at the Kensington Tower, but at a small, discreet diner in New Jersey where no one would recognize us. Seeing him, my father's oldest friend, a man with hair like silver steel and eyes that had seen every ruthless deal in New York, sat in a vinyl booth made me want to cry. But I didn't. Uncle Hen, I said, sliding a thick manila envelope across the table. I need you to do something for me. And you're not going to like it. He opened the envelope. Inside were the photos. The receipts for the handbag. The call logs. And most importantly, the internal company memos that Robert had forwarded to his personal email, memos that contained sensitive trade secrets. I had hacked his laptop while he slept. It turns out, for a man who thought he was a genius, his password was simply Robert1. Mr. Henderson looked at the documents, his face darkening with a terrifying rage. Sarah, he growled, his voice low and dangerous. This is theft. Corporate espionage. And infidelity. I will destroy him. I will have security throw him out of the window today. No, I said, placing my hand over his. Not today. Today, you are going to promote him. Mr. Henderson looked at me as if I had lost my mind. Promote him? After this? Yes, I replied, my voice steady. I want you to sign a provisional promotion letter. Make him the acting vice president of marketing. Tell him it's effective immediately, pending a formal announcement at the gala. Tell him he's untouchable. Why? Mr. Henderson asked, confused. Why give him what he wants? Because, I said, staring at my reflection in the napkin holder. The higher he climbs, the harder he falls. I want him to feel invincible. I want him to walk into that gala thinking he owns the world. I want his ego to be so inflated that when I pop it, the sound will be deafening. I also gave Mr. Henderson specific instructions for the gala itself. The lighting. The sound system. The security detail. I wanted specific guards, the ones who had worked for my father for 20 years, the ones who were fiercely loyal to the Kensington name. And one more thing, I added. I need you to invite Mr. Stevens. Make sure he comes. Stevens? Henderson asked. He's semi-retired. He hates these parties. Tell him it's a favor to Richard Kensington's daughter, I said. Tell him I'm finally coming home. Mr. Henderson looked at me for a long time. Then, a slow, proud smile spread across his face. You look just like your mother when you do that, he whispered. God help that boy. Back at the apartment, I played my role perfectly. I ironed Robert's tuxedo. I listened to him brag about the rumors of his promotion. I think it's happening, babe, he told me the night before the party, admiring himself in the mirror. Henderson winked at me in the hallway. I'm going to be a VP. Do you know what that means? No more taking the subway. We're getting a driver. That sounds wonderful, Rob, I said, folding his socks. You deserve it. I do, don't I? He grinned. I really do. The arrogance was suffocating. But it was the night of the gala itself that truly tested my resolve. As I mentioned, I wore the dress. The morning dress, as I called it in my head. It was shapeless, made of a scratchy synthetic blend that Robert thought was appropriate for a cousin from the country. But underneath that dress? Oh, you better believe I was armored. I was wearing silk lingerie that cost more than his car. In my purse, hidden in a secret lining, was a tube of my signature red lipstick, Kensington Red, a custom shade my mother used to wear. And, of course, I had my phone, fully charged, connected to the gala's main audio-visual system thanks to a backdoor access code Mr. Henderson had given me. As we drove to the plaza, Robert was practically vibrating with excitement. He kept checking his phone. Ping. He smiled. Ping. He laughed. Who's that? I asked, knowing the answer. Just the team, he lied smoothly. Getting pumped for the night. It was Jessica. I knew because I was mirroring his phone to mine. Jessica, I'm wearing the red dress. You're going to die when you see me. I can't wait to celebrate our promotion. Robert, be patient, baby. Soon. Once I ditch the dead weight, the night is ours. Dead weight. That's what I was. I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, blurring into streaks of gold. I wasn't sad anymore. I was just ready. I felt like an archer who had drawn the bowstring back as far as it could go. The tension was unbearable, but the release was going to be spectacular. When we arrived at the plaza, the valet, old Thomas, opened my door. His eyes widened when he saw me. He started to bow. "Miss Ken." I put a finger to my lips, a sharp, silent command. "Not yet, Thomas." He understood instantly. He straightened up, nodded once, and closed the door. "Have a wonderful evening, ma'am." Robert didn't notice. He was too busy checking his reflection in the car window. He tossed the keys to Thomas without even looking at him. "Keep it close, Chief. We might leave early to celebrate." I followed Robert into the revolving doors, my heart beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. Thump. 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 It was the sound of a war drum. "Remember the rules," Robert whispered as we entered the lobby, grabbing my elbow tightly. "Invisible." "Don't worry, Rob," I whispered back, a ghost of a smile touching my lips. "You won't even know I'm here. Until you do." The ballroom was a sensory overload. Gold leaf detailed the ceiling, massive floral arrangements of white orchids and hydrangeas towered over the tables, and the orchestra played a waltz that floated through the air like expensive perfume. This was my world. I knew the thread count of the tablecloths. I knew the vintage of the wine being poured. I knew that the third chandelier on the left had a slightly loose crystal that tinkled if the base was too heavy. But tonight, I was an alien in my own kingdom. "Stay here," Robert commanded as soon as we cleared the entrance. He pointed to a darkened corner near the kitchen service doors. It was the spot where waiters staged dirty trays. "Get a drink if you want, but stick to water or soda. I don't want you getting tipsy and loud." "Okay," I said obediently. "I have to go work the room," he said, adjusting his cuffs. "Big night. Wish me luck." "Good luck, Rob," I said. "You're going to need it." He frowned, thinking he misheard me, but then shook his head and strode away, diving into the crowd like a shark smelling blood. I stood there, holding my clutch, and watched. It was fascinating, really, to watch a social climber in his natural habitat. Robert moved from group to group, his smile plastered on, laughing too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. I saw him approach the CFO, practically bowing. I saw him slap the back of a junior analyst, asserting dominance. He was playing the part of the successful executive, but to me, he looked desperate. He looked sweaty. From my vantage point in the shadows, I saw things he missed. I saw the way the senior directors exchanged glances when he walked away, looks of amusement, of tolerance, not respect. They knew he was a climber. They tolerated him because he brought in numbers, but he was never one of them. He didn't have the pedigree, and he certainly didn't have the class. I saw Mr. Henderson across the room, standing by the stage. He was holding a glass of sparkling water, looking bored. Then, his eyes scanned the room and found me in my corner. He didn't wave. He just gave a barely perceptible nod. "I see you. We are ready." I nodded back. Time dragged on. Waiters passed me, ignoring me, assuming I was staff or someone's poor relation. One waiter, a young man I didn't recognize, stopped. "Can I get you anything, miss?" "Champagne," he offered kindly. "Just water, please," I said. "Thank you." He poured it and smiled. "Lovely party, isn't it?" "It's certainly interesting," I replied. Then, the atmosphere shifted. The air in the room seemed to get charged with static. I followed the gaze of the men nearby. She had arrived. Jessica entered the ballroom not like an employee, but like a celebrity. Her dress was a scandal, a fire-engine red silk number that hugged every curve and dipped dangerously low in the back. It was beautiful, yes, but it was loud. It screamed for attention. It was a dress worn by a woman who wanted to be looked at, not a woman who wanted to be taken seriously in a boardroom. Robert found her instantly. It was like they were magnets. He abandoned the conversation he was having with a VP and made a beeline for her. I watched as they met in the center of the room. They didn't kiss, that would be too obvious, but the intimacy was palpable. Robert leaned in close, whispering something in her ear that made her throw her head back and laugh. He placed his hand on the small of her back, his fingers splayed possessively. It was disgusting. Not because I was jealous, that emotion had burned out long ago, but because of the sheer disrespect. They were in my house, eating my food, drinking my wine, and flaunting their betrayal in my face. I saw colleagues looking at them. The whispers started. Is that the new intern? Robert Miller is certainly mentoring her closely. Where is his wife? Didn't he say she was coming? I took a sip of my water. The ice clinked against the glass. Enjoy it while it lasts, Rob, I thought. Enjoy the red dress. Enjoy the attention. Because in about 20 minutes, the only thing you're going to be wearing is shame. I checked my phone. 8:15 p.m. Mr. Stevens was due to arrive at 8:20 p.m. The speech was scheduled for 8:30 p.m. The clock was ticking. Every second brought us closer to the guillotine. I watched Robert lead Jessica toward the bar, passing right by my corner. They didn't see me. I was part of the furniture. God, these people are so stuffy, I heard Jessica complain, her voice shrill. When can we leave? You promised we could go to that club downtown. Soon, baby, Robert soothed her. After the announcement. Once I'm VP, we can do whatever we want. We can leave this old hag of a company to rot. Old hag of a company. My mother's company. That comment sealed his fate. If I had any lingering doubts, any tiny shred of mercy left for the man I once married, it evaporated right there. He didn't just hate me, he hated the legacy I represented. He wanted the money, but he despised the source. I set my jaw. 8:18 p.m. The doors opened. Mr. Stevens walked in. The game was on. I knew I had to move closer. If I stayed in the corner, the confrontation with Mr. Stevens might happen too far away, or worse, Robert might steer him in the opposite direction. I needed to be an obstacle. I needed to be unavoidable. I took a deep breath and stepped out of the shadows. I walked slowly toward the center of the room, navigating through the sea of tuxedos and gowns. I kept my head down, playing the part of the shy, overwhelmed wife, but my eyes were sharp, tracking Robert's movements. He and Jessica were holding court near a large ice sculpture of a swan. They were surrounded by a few junior associates who were laughing too hard at Robert's jokes, clearly trying to suck up to the future VP. I approached them. I didn't say anything, I just stood about 5 feet away, hovering. Jessica saw me first. Her eyes narrowed. She nudged Robert. Your baggage is drifting, she whispered loud enough for me to hear. Robert turned. His face tightened when he saw me. He excused himself from the group and marched over to me, grabbing my arm and pulling me aside. What are you doing? He hissed. I told you to stay in the corner. I was thirsty, I said innocently. And I wanted to see the ice sculpture. It's beautiful. It's ice, Sarah. It's frozen water. Go back to your spot. You're ruining the aesthetic. The aesthetic? I asked, looking at Jessica in her scarlet dress. Is that what she is? The aesthetic? Robert turned red. Don't start. Jessica is a valued employee. Unlike you, she actually contributes to this company. At that moment, Jessica sauntered over. She held a glass of red wine in her hand. She looked at me with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a predator looking at prey. Hi there, she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. You must be Sarah? Robert has told me so much about you. Has he? I replied calmly. He hasn't mentioned you at all. Except as the intern. Jessica's smile faltered for a millisecond, but she recovered quickly. Oh, I'm much more than an intern now. I'm his right hand. She took a step closer, invading my personal space. You know, Sarah, this party is really for the professionals. It must be so overwhelming for a housewife. Do you even know anyone here? I know everyone here, I said, the truth slipping out. Right, she laughed. Of course you do. Then, it happened. It was so calculated, so cliché, yet so effective. Jessica pretended to stumble. She pitched forward slightly, and the glass of red wine in her hand accidentally tipped. A splash of dark crimson liquid hit my chest and soaked into the fabric of my black dress. It wasn't a lot, the black hid most of the stain, but it was wet, cold, and humiliating. Oh my God! Jessica shrieked, putting a hand over her mouth. I am so clumsy. I am so sorry. Did I ruin your dress? She looked at the cheap fabric with disdain. Well, at least it wasn't silk. It looks like polyester, right? It should wash out. Robert rushed to her side. Not mine. Are you okay, Jess? He asked frantically. Did you spill any on yourself? I'm fine, she whimpered, playing the victim. I just feel terrible. Sarah, I am so sorry. I looked down at the wine stain. Then I looked up at them. I didn't react the way they wanted. I didn't cry. I didn't run to the bathroom to scrub it off. It's fine, I said, my voice flat. It's just a dress. Accidents happen to people who can't handle their liquor. Jessica's eyes flashed with anger. Robert glared at me. Apologize to her, Robert demanded. Me? I asked, incredulous. She spilled wine on me. You upset her. You're making a scene. Apologize. I stared at him. This man, who was supposed to protect me, was demanding I apologize to his mistress for ruining my clothes. No, I said. Robert! A booming voice interrupted us. We all turned. Mr. Stevens was standing there. He had seen the whole thing. His face was unreadable, but his eyes were focused intensely on me. Mr. Stevens. Robert's demeanor flipped instantly. He became the charming executive again, though sweat was beading on his forehead. So glad you could make it. Have you met, the team? This brings us back to the moment. The moment of the lie. The moment Robert called me the housekeeper. You know what happened next. The lie. The introduction of Jessica as his future wife. The shattering of my world. But now, you know the context. You know about the wine. You know about the homeless comment in the lobby. You know about the stolen money, the prenup, the furniture restoration. You know exactly why, when I walked away from that group, I wasn't retreating. I was reloading. I walked down the long, marble hallway toward the restrooms. My heels clicked rhythmically on the floor, click, 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 like the ticking of a bomb. I passed a few women fixing their makeup, who glanced at my wine-stained dress with pity. I ignored them. I pushed open the door to the handicap stall, the one with the most space and a full-length mirror. I locked the door. The silence in the bathroom was a stark contrast to the noise of the ballroom. I leaned against the door for a second, closing my eyes. I let myself feel the pain one last time. I felt the sting of the housekeeper comment. I felt the weight of 2 years of lies. I felt the ghost of the girl who just wanted to be loved for herself. And then, I opened my eyes. That girl was gone. I looked at my reflection. The black dress was frumpy, hiding my figure. The bun was severe, aging me by 10 years. The lack of makeup made me look tired. Enough, I whispered to the mirror. I reached into my purse. First, the hair. I ripped out the elastic band and the dozen bobby pins holding the bun in place. My hair, thick and wavy, tumbled down around my shoulders, reaching the middle of my back. I shook it out, running my fingers through it to give it volume. Instantly, I looked younger. Wilder. Next, the face. I pulled out the tube of Kensington red lipstick. My mother had designed this shade herself. She said it was a color for women who wanted to be heard, not just seen. I applied it carefully. The vibrant red transformed my face, making my eyes pop and my skin look porcelain rather than pale. I added a swipe of mascara and a touch of blush. The woman staring back at me wasn't a tired housewife. She was a warrior putting on war paint. Then, the dress. I couldn't change it, but I could alter it. I reached down and grabbed the hem of the cheap fabric. With a violent yank, I ripped the side seam up to my mid-thigh. It was a jagged tear, but it looked intentional, a slit that allowed me to move, that showed off my legs. I unbuttoned the high collar, folding the fabric in to create a V-neck. It wasn't high fashion, but it was no longer a sack. It was rebellious. Finally, the jewelry. I sat on the closed toilet lid and pulled the small velvet pouch from my bra, where I had hidden it. The Kensington emeralds. I fastened the necklace around my neck. The heavy, cold stones settled against my skin. They glittered green fire under the bathroom lights. These were crown jewels. They were unmistakable. Anyone who knew the history of New York knew this necklace. I stood up. I looked at myself. Sarah Evans was dead. Long live Sarah Kensington. I took out my phone. I opened the text thread with Mr. Henderson. Me, activation. Cut the music in 2 minutes. Mr. Henderson, copy that. Give them hell, kid. I unlocked the stall door and stepped out. A woman was washing her hands at the sink. She looked up, saw me in the mirror, and gasped. She saw the emeralds. Her eyes went wide. She recognized them. She recognized me. Oh my God, she whispered. You're... Shoo, I said, pressing a finger to my red lips. Don't spoil the surprise. I walked out of the bathroom. The hallway felt different now. I didn't walk near the walls. I walked right down the center. I returned to the ballroom entrance. The air inside was still thick with chatter and jazz. Robert and Jessica were still near the stage, laughing. Robert had his hand on her waist. He looked so smug. He thought he had gotten away with it. He thought I was crying in a stall somewhere. I stepped through the doors. The energy in the room shifted. It rippled outward from where I stood. People turned. The conversation died down in waves. They saw the hair. They saw the red lips. They saw the slit in the dress. And then, they saw the emeralds. Whispers broke out like wildfire. Is that? Look at that necklace. That looks like Sarah Kensington. But she's been gone for years. Who is that woman? I ignored them all. I locked my eyes on the stage. I walked. And that brings us back to the microphone. To the moment I took control. Is this thing on? The room was silent. Robert was staring at me, his mouth slightly open. He didn't recognize the necklace, but he recognized the change in me. He looked like a deer who just realized the headlights were actually a freight train. I took a breath. My husband introduced me as his housekeeper, I said again, letting the words hang there. But he forgot to mention that I am not the housekeeper. I paused for effect. I am the landlord. The landlord, someone whispered in the front row. I am Sarah Kensington, I declared, my voice booming through the speakers. daughter of Richard and Carmen Kensington, owner of this hotel, owner of this building, and majority shareholder of the Kensington Group. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. Then, the sound of a glass shattering on the floor broke the spell. Pandemonium. Gasps, shouts, and frantic whispering erupted. I saw the board of directors, who were standing near the bar, straighten up in shock. Mr. Henderson stepped forward from the shadows, crossing his arms and nodding confirmingly to the room. That was the seal of authenticity. If Henderson was backing me, it was true. I looked at Robert. He wasn't pale anymore. He was gray. He looked like his soul had left his body. He stumbled back, bumping into Jessica. "Sarah," he mouthed, no sound coming out. "Kensington?" Jessica looked from him to me, her eyes darting frantically. She was trying to do the math. Housekeeper. Heiress. Billions. The horror on her face was exquisite. She dropped Robert's arm as if he were radioactive. "Yes, Robert," I said, addressing him directly from the stage. The spotlight felt warm on my face. "You spent 2 years complaining that you couldn't get a break at this company. You spent 2 years begging for a promotion. You spent 2 years telling me I was useless, that I dragged you down." I walked to the edge of the stage, looking down at him. "You didn't know that the only reason you got this job was because I made a phone call. You didn't know that the reason you weren't fired for your incompetence last year was because I intervened. You built your entire life on a foundation that I poured." Robert shook his head, denial washing over him. No, that's not true. I worked hard. I earned this. You earned nothing. I snapped, my voice cracking like a whip. You stole. I know about the expense accounts, Robert. I know about the client dinners that were actually dates with her. I pointed a long finger at Jessica. I know about the trade secrets you emailed to your personal account last night. I know everything. The crowd gasped again. Accusations of corporate theft were serious. This wasn't just a marital spat anymore, it was a crime scene. And you, I turned my gaze to Jessica. She shrank back, trying to hide behind a waiter. Jessica, is it? The future wife? The one who thinks I look like a homeless person? Jessica trembled. I didn't know. I swear, Mrs. Kensington. I mean, Sarah, he told me. He told you I was a maid, I finished for her. And you believed him because it suited you. You liked the idea of being the queen bee. You spilled wine on me tonight because you wanted to mark your territory. I touched the wine stain on my dress. Well, congratulations. You marked it. But you forgot one thing. You don't mark territory in a lion's den. Mr. Stevens, standing near Robert, looked at him with pure disgust. He stepped away, creating a physical distance between himself and the adulterer. The other executives followed suit, forming a circle of isolation around Robert and Jessica. They were pariahs in real time. "Sarah, please," Robert finally found his voice. He took a step toward the stage, his hands out, pleading. "Baby, let's talk. Not here. Not in front of everyone. We can explain. I love you. This was just a mistake. A misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" I laughed, a cold, dry sound. "You introduced another woman as your fiancée an hour ago. You called me slow. You called me the help." I was panicked, he cried, sweat pouring down his face. "I didn't want to embarrass you. I did it to protect you." "You did it to protect your ego," I corrected. "And now, I'm going to protect my company." I turned to the crowd. I apologize to all of our guests for this disruption. The Kensington Group stands for integrity, family, and trust. Tonight, those values were violated by 2 of our employees. I looked back at Robert. Robert Miller, you are fired. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You are barred from all Kensington properties worldwide. And don't worry about your car, the company lease has been terminated as of 5 minutes ago. And Jessica, I added, almost as an afterthought. You're fired too. And I suggest you check your email. The legal department has just sent you a notice regarding the non-disclosure agreement you signed. Talking to a competitor about our projects is a breach of contract. You'll be hearing from our lawyers. The room erupted in applause. It started slow, Mr. Henderson clapping his hands, and then it swelled. The women in the room clapped the loudest. They clapped for the justice. They clapped for the takedown. But I wasn't done. There was one final nail for the coffin. Oh, and Robert? I called out as 2 large security guards moved toward him. He looked up, tears streaming down his face, a broken man. The prenup, I said softly into the mic. You remember the one you signed without reading? The one you laughed at? He nodded dumbly. It has a fidelity clause, I smiled. If you cheat, you get nothing. No alimony. No settlement. You leave with what you came with. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the cheap silver hair clip he had given me on our first birthday together, the one thing I had cherished. I tossed it off the stage. It landed at his feet with a tiny metal clink. You came with that, I said. Take it. And get out of my hotel. The security guards, 2 massive men named Tony and Mike who had been my father's personal bodyguards, flanked Robert and Jessica. Let's go, sir, Tony said, his voice leaving no room for argument. He grabbed Robert by the upper arm. No, wait. Sarah. You can't do this. Robert screamed, struggling weakly. I'm your husband. I helped build this. You built nothing but a web of lies. I shouted back, my voice raw. They dragged him toward the exit. Jessica was sobbing loudly, her mascara running down her face, ruining her perfect look. She tried to push Robert away. Get off me, she yelled at him. You said you were rich. You said she was nobody. You ruined my life. You ruined mine. Robert yelled back. You tempted me. This is your fault. They were screaming at each other as they were hauled out of the ballroom, a pathetic, squabbling mess. The doors slammed shut behind them, cutting off their noise. The silence returned. But this time, it wasn't heavy. It was light. It was clean. I stood on the stage, trembling slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. I looked out at the crowd. They were looking at me with awe. Mr. Stevens walked up to the stage. He offered his hand. I took it, and he helped me down the stairs. Richard would have been proud, he whispered to me. That was formidable. Thank you, Mr. Stevens, I said. I was surrounded. People wanted to shake my hand. They wanted to apologize for ignoring me earlier. They wanted to praise my dress, my hair, my courage. I always knew there was something special about you, one woman lied. That was the most incredible thing I've ever seen, another said genuinely. I smiled and nodded, playing the part of the gracious hostess, but inside, I just wanted fresh air. I signaled to Mr. Henderson. He understood immediately and cleared a path for me. Give Mrs. Kensington some space, he barked. She needs air. I walked out of the ballroom, past the lobby where I had been humiliated just hours before, and out onto the front steps of the plaza. The night air was cool and crisp. It had started to rain lightly, a soft mist that felt cleansing on my skin. I saw them. Robert and Jessica were on the sidewalk. They had been dumped there by security. They looked like wet rats. Robert's tuxedo was soaked. Jessica was shivering, hugging her arms, barefoot because she had broken a heel. They saw me standing at the top of the stairs, under the golden awning, dry and protected. Robert took a step toward me, but Tony stepped in front of him, crossing his arms. "Back," Tony growled. Robert looked at me. His eyes were hollow. The arrogance was gone. All that was left was a terrifying realization of what he had lost. "Sarah," he whispered. "Please. I have nowhere to go. My parents, they'll be ashamed. I can't go back to Ohio like this." I looked at him. I remembered the man who laughed when I spilled coffee. I searched for him in Robert's eyes, but he wasn't there. Only a stranger remained. "That's not my problem, Robert," I said. "You wanted to be a big shot. You wanted the high life. Well, now you have a great story to tell. You were married to a billionaire, and you blew it for a fake handbag and an ego boost." I turned to Jessica. "And you," I said. "I hope you learned something tonight. Never underestimate a woman just because she's quiet. And never assume that the help isn't the one signing your paycheck." I turned my back on them. I walked back into the warmth of my hotel. "Stop here for a moment. That feeling? That rush of justice? That is what we live for. But my story isn't quite over yet. The aftermath was messy, and rebuilding my life took more than just one dramatic night. If you are still listening, if you are still with me on this journey, please, do me a favor. Hit that like button and comment the number 1 down below. Just the number 1. It tells me that you are a survivor, that you are strong, and that you are rooting for Sarah. Seeing those ones in the comments means the world to me. It keeps me going. So please, comment 1 now, and let me tell you what happened when the dust settled. The days following the gala were a blur of lawyers, press releases, and emotional hangovers. The story hit the tabloids, of course. Heiress in hiding, Kensington CEO reveals identity at shocking gala. Robert's face was plastered on page 6 as the cheating husband who lost it all. I stayed in the Kensington penthouse for a week, refusing to go back to the apartment in Queens. I couldn't bear to see the furniture we had bought together, the coffee mugs, the bed where he had lied to me. I sent a moving crew to pack up my things, my tools, my restored pieces, my clothes. I told them to leave everything else. Robert's clothes, his gadgets, his expensive shoes, I left them all there. I filed for divorce the morning after the gala. Thanks to the prenup and the evidence of infidelity, it was an open and shut case. Robert tried to contest it. He hired a shady lawyer who tried to argue that I had defrauded him by hiding my wealth, claiming emotional distress. My lawyer, a shark named Eleanor who ate men like Robert for breakfast, laughed him out of the deposition room. "Mr. Miller," she said, sliding a photo across the table, a photo of him and Jessica kissing in the lobby. "You signed a contract. You breached the contract. Be grateful Mrs. Kensington isn't suing you for the money you embezzled from the joint account." He signed the papers. He had no choice. The final confrontation happened when he came to pick up his boxes from the Queen's apartment. I wasn't there, but the building superintendent, Mr. Russo, told me about it later. "He looked bad, Miss Sarah," Mr. Russo told me over the phone. "Real bad. Didn't shave. Looked like he hadn't slept. He asked if you were there. I told him you moved uptown. Did he take his things?" I asked. "Yeah. He packed it all into a U-Haul. Said he was driving back to his folks' place in Dayton. He was crying, Miss Sarah. Sat on the curb and just cried. I felt a twinge of pity, faint and fleeting. But then I remembered the homeless comment. I remembered the cruelty. And the pity vanished. He was crying for himself, not for us. Jessica didn't fare much better. The industry is small. Word spread that she had leaked confidential info and slept with a married boss. She was blacklisted. I heard she moved to the West Coast, trying to start over as a yoga instructor or something. I didn't care. She was a footnote in my life. The hardest part wasn't the legal battle, it was the internal one. I had to reconcile Sarah Evans with Sarah Kensington. I had spent so long hiding that I had forgotten how to be me. I went back to my workshop. I stood there in my silk blouse and tailored trousers, looking at a half-finished dresser. I picked up a piece of sandpaper. It felt right in my hand. I realized I didn't have to choose. I could be both. I could be the CEO who terrified board members and the artist who loved the smell of cedar. I started going into the Kensington offices every day. I took over the corner office that had been my father's. I fired the toxic executives Robert had idolized. I promoted the quiet, hardworking ones, the ones who, like me, had been invisible. I changed the culture. No more trophy wives comments. No more arrogance. We build things, I told the staff at my first town hall meeting. We don't just build buildings, we build trust. And if you lie, you leave. They cheered. For the first time, I felt like I belonged in that tower. 1 month later, I was leaving the office. It was raining again. New York seems to cry whenever my life changes. My driver pulled the car up to the curb. As I walked under the umbrella held by the doorman, a figure stepped out from the shadows of the building next door. It was Robert. He looked diminished. His suit was ill-fitting, clearly one he hadn't tailored. He looked thinner. "Sarah," he called out, his voice cracking. The security guard stepped forward, hand on his taser. "Ma'am? Do you want me to remove him?" I looked at Robert. He wasn't a threat. He was a ghost. "It's okay, Tony," I said. "Give us a minute." Robert walked closer, stopping a few feet away. The rain dripped off his nose. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said. "Going to Ohio. My dad got me a job at his hardware store." "That's good, Rob," I said neutrally. "Honest work." He flinched at the word honest. I wanted to say I'm sorry, he stammered. "Not for the money. Not for the job. But for the eggs." I frowned. "The eggs?" "That morning," he said, looking down at his wet shoes. "When I said the eggs were bad. They weren't. They were good. You always made them perfect. I wanted to make you feel small so I could feel big. I was scared, Sarah. Everyone at that company was so rich, so smart. I felt like a fraud. So I took it out on you." He looked up, his eyes red. "I loved you. In the beginning. Before I got greedy. I really did love you." I looked at him, and for the first time in months, the anger was gone. It was replaced by a profound sadness for the waste of it all. We could have been happy. If he had just been honest. If he had just been kind. "I know you did, Rob," I said softly. "And I loved you. But you fell in love with a reflection of yourself. And when that reflection wasn't shiny enough, you tried to break the mirror." I opened my purse and pulled out an envelope. "I knew you might come," I said. "Or I was going to mail this to Ohio." He took it. "What is it? Money?" "No," I said. "It's the deed to the apartment in Queens." He stared at me, shocked. "I bought the building years ago," I explained. "Unit 4B. It's yours." "I don't want it. Too many bad memories." You can live in it, or you can sell it. If you sell it, it's worth enough to start over. To go back to school. To do something real. He held the envelope, his hands shaking. Why? After everything I did? Because I'm not you, I said simply. And because everyone deserves a chance to fix what they broke. Even you. I turned and got into the car. Sarah, he called out as the door closed. Thank you. I didn't look back. I watched him in the rearview mirror, a small figure in the rain, holding the last piece of charity I would ever give him. I told the driver to drive. I didn't cry. I smiled. 3 months have passed since that night in the rain. Life is different now. Better. I wake up in my penthouse, but I still make my own scrambled eggs. I drink my coffee on the balcony, overlooking Central Park. I run the Kensington group with Mr. Henderson by my side, but I also spend my weekends at a new workshop I opened in Brooklyn. It's a community center now, the Evans Workshop. I teach women, mostly survivors of domestic abuse, how to restore furniture. I teach them how to take something broken and make it strong again. It's my favorite thing in the world. Last week, I was sanding a table when one of my students, a young woman named Maria, asked me a question. Miss Sarah, she said, wiping sawdust from her forehead. Do you ever miss being married? I stopped sanding. I thought about it. I miss the idea of it, I answered honestly. I miss having someone to share the day with. But I don't miss the silence. I don't miss shrinking myself to fit into someone else's pocket. Will you ever marry again? She asked. I laughed. Maybe. But next time, he's going to know exactly who I am from the first date. No more secrets. If a man can't handle Sarah Kensington, he doesn't deserve Sarah Evans. Mr. Stevens, the investor from the gala, actually asked me out to dinner recently. Not a date, exactly, but close. He's older, kind, and he knows exactly who I am. We talked for hours about business, about art, about life. It was refreshing to speak to someone as an equal. I'm not rushing into anything. I'm enjoying the freedom. I'm enjoying the fact that I can buy organic chicken without being yelled at. I'm enjoying wearing my emeralds whenever I damn well please. I received a postcard from Ohio yesterday. It had no return address. Just a picture of a hardware store. On the back, it said, sold the apartment. Use the money to pay off my parents' debt and buy into the store. I'm working the counter. I'm learning. Thank you. I pinned it to my bulletin board. A reminder. A closed chapter. So, that is my story. The story of how a billionaire heiress became a housekeeper, and how a housekeeper became a queen again. I wanted to share this with you not just to entertain you with the drama, though, let's be honest, it was dramatic, but to tell you something important. We women, we are trained to accommodate. We are trained to make ourselves smaller so men can feel bigger. We are trained to apologize for taking up space. I did it. I hid my light under a bushel because I was afraid it would blind the man I loved. But the right man? The right people? They won't be blinded by your light. They will grab sunglasses and bask in it. Don't ever let anyone treat you like the help in your own life. You are the CEO. You are the landlord. You own the building. If someone treats you like trash, don't just take it. Wait. Plan. And when the moment is right, put on your red lipstick, wear your best diamonds, or your best smile, and remind them exactly who they are dealing with. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for the likes, the comments, the support. You have no idea how much it means to me to share this burden and this victory with you. This is Sarah Kensington, signing off. I have a board meeting to get to, and after that, I have a chair to sand. Take care of yourselves, ladies. And remember, keep your head up, or your crown slips.